Good morning, DC. Stretch out those legs and get ready to welcome in the beautiful, beautiful day. And what better way to welcome it in than a companion such as the Capitol Hoop Caucus. I'm Wardell McCabe, and I'm joined, as always, by my two co-hosts. First is a man who you can catch racing through the streets of Manassas in his GMC Sierra. It's Isaac Harris, and the man to his left is a man who you can catch cruising through the district in his Dodge Challenger. It's Troy Halliburton. Gentlemen, how are you feeling this week?
I'm feeling amazing right now, man.
It's been a long week. It's been a long week, but it's all positive, though. It's all positive.
Long week, but let's go ahead and bring in this week. We're going to recap it with something we're going to launch every week going forward, a question of the week. And for the very first one, let me just ask you both. First, Isaac, I'll ask you, what's a random thing you thought of this week?
A random? Probably ice cream, like homemade ice cream, making it.
Mm-hmm. Making homemade ice cream. Okay.
Yeah, that's not in, and I realize I do not have, although I think I have the power to do it, it's not
the power to do it.
I can do it, but you probably shouldn't. It's probably going to taste bad, so no.
Hey, man, you got to believe in yourself. Where's the confidence at? Come on now.
No, it's ice cream, though. Yeah.
All right, Troy, how about you? What's something Randy thought of?
The random thought that comes to my mind is the phrase when idols become rivals. And as I'm sitting back here watching Alcaraz just take it to his idol, Novak Djokovic, it just really disturbs me as to how good this guy is at tennis. It's disturbing. It's disturbing.
I can't confirm. It's getting pretty tense here right now. But one thing that I thought of pretty randomly, and I put a lot of thought into this, and I just want to clarify this on the front end. I think that he's a very stand-up guy. Everything I've seen on him on social media, he seems very genuine and nice. Keanu Reeves, he seems like a great guy, but I just really wish he knew how to act, you know? I think I've been struggling with that.
This is rage bait.
Rage bait. It's not rage bait. He's just playing the same person and he's just Keanu Reeves and everything.
Oh my God, we're not going to have Neo from the Matrix slander here.
Rage bait. Like no.
Okay, Neo. Let's just break down Neo. It's just Keanu Reeves and a computer, right? That's all he is. Everything he does is just Keanu Reeves. There's no range to him. Can't act himself out of a bag. But anyways, we're not a Keanu Reeves-based podcast. We are, in fact, a basketball podcast. Isn't that right, Troy?
Yes, we are trying to be the preeminent basketball show in the DMV area, covering all levels of hoops from high school to college to the pros, to from women's game to the men's game. Like if they're throwing the round ball up, we're covering it.
Absolutely, and we are covering it on the radio airways. That's right. You can catch us every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN 630. Or if you can't listen on the radio, or if you're just not from the DMV area, then just know that you can catch us on the podcast feed wherever it is that you get your podcast. But as a nice, gentle reminder, too, we're also on YouTube. That's right. This is the second time we are on YouTube. So if our host wouldn't mind just looking right at that camera and giving a little nice little wave. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. But let's start to focus on today's show because we've got a pretty chock-full episode today. We'll be recapping what's happened with the Mystics over the past 2 weeks, namely their losing streak, and also a recent signing that they've made. And from there, we'll discuss some new developments with a Washington Wizards point guard who seems to have earned himself some new representation. And then there's also some G League changes which may affect the Capital City Go-Go. So we'll touch on that a little bit too. But back to the Wizards, though. They've had some players participating in the FIBA AmeriCup and EuroBasket. So we'll give an update there. And we'll also continue grading the off-seasons around the association this week, keying in on the Central Division. We'll be answering some of your questions that you submitted to us too. And to close things out, we'll have trivia time from the line. But first, let's go ahead and kick things off with the Beltway Beat. As I said there, we're starting with the Washington Mystics. It's been 2 weeks since we've been able to give you all an update on the Mystics because last week we had a very special episode which we recorded live at the UABL's Tournament of Nations. So let's just quickly go through the last few games for the Mystics since we've checked in with y'all. They had an 81-91 loss to the Aces, then an 82-84 loss to the Storm, then a 63-89 loss at the Liberty, 62-99 loss at Golden State. They're still not able to get that elusive win over the expansion franchise. A 78-81 loss to the Sparks, and then a 69-75 loss to the Mercury. A lot of losses there. Those losses bring their current losing streak now to 8. and at 16-26 on the season, they've been eliminated from playoff contention. So, my question to you both first: what have you felt over the last 2 weeks of Mystics basketball, Troy?
Man, it's been a rough watch. It's the thing that I think that is kind of most frustrating is the fact that we used to really commend the Mystics at the beginning of the season for being competitive and being in almost every game. And so for them to get the doors blown off of them in some of these games, like that's the thing that's really concerning, and I really have taken note of over the last 2 weeks. And I think that this is, I think that we all thought that this would be a, rebuilding season for the Mystics coming into this season. But I think once they, started out as hot as they did, I think that the level of expectations kind of shifted a little bit. But, it's a harsh reality to come back down to earth and have them finish the season the way that they are.
Yeah, they've definitely performed like the team that at least I thought they were going to be going into the season. They had that high point where, as Troy, you mentioned, they were in just about every single game they were playing in, and that kind of disappeared. I think we probably should have seen this coming post-trade deadline, right? They got rid of, admittedly, 2 of their 5 or 6 best players, right? And so I think we all expected somewhat of a come down to earth, but those first 4 games post-trade deadline, they were still in each of those games, and so to see the loss that they had with the Liberty, not great, but then to follow that up with having an almost identical loss to the Valkyries, somehow worse, it's very disheartening to say the least.
Yeah, no, I feel for Mystics fans. You were so high up, and now like the way we're ending, and the old saying, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. We're not finishing the way we started, and not finishing strong is kind of a letdown, but you can only hope that maybe this goes into the grand plan of possibly doing well in the lottery. But even then, for me personally, I don't know. I have no belief in that. So we'll see. It's rough.
All right, well, we'll talk a little bit more about what we see for the team going forward. But I will note there are some high points over the past 2 weeks. Sonia Citron, she set the WNBA record for the most double-digit scoring performances by a rookie in their initial season. So that's a pretty big win. But to focus on the future of the team here, where do they go, Troy?
Well, they go to the draft war room. That's where they go. When you're looking at the fact that, okay, they finished the season, they're on an 8-game losing streak, and then I think a lot of people need to be very familiar with the WNBA draft lottery rules, where they compile the records of the last 2 years to use as the draft lottery standings. And so the Mystics are now 30-52 in the last 2 seasons. So that puts them in the 4th slot as far as the draft lottery concerns are. And so, that gives them a shot at, possibly getting one of those top picks. And they also have 2 other first-round draft picks in this year's draft. So, the as soon as the last game of the year against the New York Liberty ends, then I think that the Washington Mystics will directly pivot into their college scouting and trying to figure out how they can add some young players to this already young core.
All right, let's focus on what it is that they should be trying to add, and by doing so, let's examine this 8-game losing streak. Where do you think that things went off the rails for them, and what will be the biggest needs of improvement for this offseason?
Well, we've been saying it all year, and I think that, they have had a glaring hole at the point guard position. They've had a lot of players out there playing the point guard position, but they really are missing a floor general who can go out there and set up their teammates and make those ladies better. Like right now, I think that, the biggest weakness on this team is being able to have some shot creation.
And I have to agree with you that on Troy. That's the big thing right there is they need a floor general that can not only help create shots, but can help create shots for others, but also create her own shot as well. Brittany Sykes showed that with you have a strong scoring guard, this offense looks amazing under Coach Sidney Johnson. But you need someone that can't just also score. You need someone that can also set up Sonia to score, because we already see that she is a double-figure machine. If you have the perfect point guard that can play a little defense and set up Sonia, Kiki, and everybody else and make other players playmakers and other threats, you have the perfect point guard.
Yeah, and they definitely have some chances and opportunities to pick that player up because, as Troy mentioned, they not only have the fourth best odds in the lottery, but they also have 2 additional first-round picks. And one of those we'll have to circle back on a couple episodes ago when Aaliyah Edwards was traded to Connecticut. They essentially swapped the ability to choose the higher of either New York or Minnesota's picks. And at the time, New York was the second best team in the league. So it really looked like they were swapping from pick 15 to pick 14. But New York has also had their own struggles over the last month. And so right now, New York is actually only just 1 game above Golden State. So there's a very slim chance here that Washington, for consecutive drafts, has 3 picks in the top 10. So it's definitely another opportunity for them to just another prospect to bring in, another high-touted prospect. Obviously, some of the teams that are going to be ahead of them, we're going to talk a little bit more about the draft lottery odds. Dallas currently has the best odds to win the lottery. So, they obviously just got the number 1 overall pick. They will have the best odds to do so again this upcoming season. Behind them is the Sky. And then still ahead of the Mystics. Who is it that is still ahead of the Mystics?
Los Angeles Sparks.
Yeah, the Sparks. And so quick notes on those, though. So the Sky actually don't have the rights to that pick. Minnesota does. So that's going to be great. Rich getting a little bit richer there. And then the Sparks don't have the rights to their pick. That's going to go to Chicago. So Chicago will still have a pick in there. They have Connecticut's pick. So Chicago will still have likely a top 5 pick, but Connecticut no longer will. And so it's just a little interesting to see how that's going to bounce around, also picking ahead of the Mystics, not in the lottery, but elsewhere. Why it is that Washington's likely going to get picked 10 or 11 is because there's 2 expansion teams in there. They're going to kind of put a wrench in all this. How do you think that those teams are going to pick, and how do you think that Washington tries to counter that? Obviously, these 2 teams, they're going to be looking for best player available. Do you think that that could limit what Washington has at their next 2 picks in that first round? And do you think that that's going to restrict whether or not they can find that playmaker?
Yeah, I think that they're going to go into this college basketball season with their eye on a couple of players, and I'm going to go out on the limb that one of those players is going to be AZ Fudd. Mm-hmm. And I think that, she already has great ties with that organization. Like, she comes to a lot of Mystics games. And, I know that they did their due diligence on her for this year's draft. And, I think that there could have been a good chance that she, could have been selected if she had decided to come out. But because she decided to go back to school at UConn and play out her senior year, I think that she has a chance to really, go out there and have an All-American type of season. And if she does that, then I think that that's a name that the Mystics would definitely be lucky to grab in the first round.
I know Isaac, obviously, there haven't been any games played this season, so it's really all just a massive question mark. But are there any players that you think that they should be trying to key on before the season even starts?
Other than AZ Fudd, who would be a great dream, I think they should keep out their name for Olivia Miles. Mm-hmm. She's a very fascinating prospect when it comes to being at that guard spot, and especially she's going to have a big year at TCU, which has been now dubbed as, Transfer U, because Haley Van Heath, revitalized her draft stock sort of when she went there to finish her transfer year. So I'm anticipating Olivia Miles to show out and possibly be a more reasonable pick. I know I would love, in a perfect world, I'd love to see AZ back in this uniform, but I think the Mystics need to also keep in reality that she might be if she has the season that everyone's anticipating, she's going to be a very popular pick that we might not be able to have access to. So to try to work around that, look at Olivia Miles and maybe see, even if you get down a little lower, to trade a little lower and find a hidden gem in the rock that the casual basketball fan wouldn't know, such as another Sonia Citron, but who's a guard who a lot of casual fans didn't initially think about until she got drafted. So that's what I'm more kind of looking at.
Well, Miles could be an interesting one. Obviously, she has playing time and experience with Citron. So Obviously, they have roots back at Notre Dame. But let's look back on this season, right? It's not fully done yet, but obviously their record is a little bit higher than I anticipated going into the season. It's also higher than what Vegas had anticipated. So even with them closing out the season the way they had, I do think that there is a success to say for this season. It's definitely, they had some high points. So let me just ask, Isaac, what were your high points from this season?
we have a sense of direction, and you have a rookie tandem that you can actually build around. You have a foundation. And when you lay down a foundation, it sets up for a stable house. And I think that's what I liked out of my high point is that drafting Kiki and Sonia sets up at least the starting of a stable building.
All right, Troy?
The high point has to be having 3 All-Stars. That to me is, very significant for a team that was very clearly rebuilding coming into this year, and for them to have 3 All-Stars and 2 of them being rookies, I think that that makes the future very bright.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, well, let's move on from the what-ifs to tangible news with the team. The Mystics announced that they have actually re-signed guard Madison Scott to a rest of season contract. They announced that on Thursday, September 4th. So congratulations are in order for her there as she earned her spot after playing on a string of 7-day deals. Let's move on, though, quickly to the Washington Wizards. Per David Aldridge, Bub Carrington is now being represented by Rich Paul in Clutch Sports Group. Troy, what effects, if any, will this have?
Well, I think, number one, it's good to have Clutch Sports be back in the fold with the Washington Wizards. They haven't had a client with the Wizards since Contavious Caldwell-Pope was here, and he was traded. They also represented John Wall. And I know that, Rich Paul used to, when John Wall was at his height, Rich Paul used to be, at a lot of Wizards games. And so, it's just good to have – the Wizards be back in the fold of, some of the big players in the game. And so, Rich Paul, to me, I think that he's so strategic with a lot of the things that he does. And so it's good for it's good for Clutch Sports to kind of plant their flag and, have, Bub Carrington on the team. So, Bub can be here, scouting out and letting Rich Paul know that, whether it's a good spot for other Clutch clients and maybe, use that as a leverage play to help get some more talented players coming into DC.
Yeah, most definitely. All right. Well, going elsewhere into DC, let's focus in on the Capital City Go-Go. I mentioned there's some changes coming to the G League. Isaac, what are those changes?
Those changes are to the playoff format. So in the G League, we have a couple more teams entering into the playoff format, expanding that playoffs, and also starting off the tip-off a little bit. The reason why this news is a little more significant is that usually when you have only 6 teams participating, the odds of seeding kind of dictates on where it all goes. Last year, the Capital City Go-Go at one point was a number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, but after one loss, dropped almost all the way down to the 6th seed, to the bottom half of the seeds in the playoffs. Now with an expanded playoff, gives a little more equal opportunity for any of those popular G League teams that want a possible home game. It kind of helps out and adds on for that.
All right, then we'll see how that progresses as the season is getting ready for their kickoff as well. But we're going to take a quick time out here. When we get back, we'll talk about the FIBA AmeriCup and EuroBasket. You're listening to the Capital Hoop Caucus on the ESPN 630 and the ESPN 630 app. Welcome back into the Capital Hoop Caucus on ESPN 630. That is Troy Halliburton, and that is Isaac Gajikameris. I'm Wardell McCabe. Thanks again for joining us. As we noted at the top of the show, the FIBA AmeriCup has run its course, and EuroBasket is now in its tournament stage. So we feel like it'd be an appropriate time to check in on how some of the Wizards roster has fared in international play, while also just giving a general update on our takes, too, on both competitions. So our thoughts, our takeaways, and such. Let's first start with the AmeriCup. For those who weren't aware, the Wizards' own Keyshawn George suited up for Team Canada, who finished 4th in the AmeriCup following an 85-90 loss to Team USA in the 3rd-place game. George had 14 points in that game, shooting 4 for 7 from the field, and 5 for 5 from the line. He also averaged 13.5 points in the entire tournament, which actually led Team Canada. So, Isaac, what were your takeaways on how George played in the AmeriCup?
This was the perfect tune-up for him. I think it expanded on how he played at Summer League, and I've always loved these international tournaments, especially for the young guys that actually do participate. And I'll go on another rant about that. But with Keyshawn participating, it really showed. He's like, hey, I am a huge big-time scorer. I'm more than just a pick-and-pop shooter. I can attack. I can slash. It showed a little more attributes on what he can bring to this Wizards team, and to be honest, it made me really excited, especially him making the All-Star team at the end of the AmeriCup tournament.
All right, well, you made a quick note there on people wanting to participate in this. What are some of the criticisms that people are having of this tournament?
Team USA does not have any active G League players or active Division I college players representing from Team USA. This is possibly the D team roster, with the exception of Langston Galloway.
Jerry and Grant, hold up. Former
Jerry,
Wizard.
Former Wizard, DMV legend, love him to death, has not been in the NBA in X amount of years.
Yeah, but I think that there's a real criticism there. A lot of people are questioning the level of competition for this tournament. It is definitely lacking the star power that its counterpart over the ocean is having in EuroBasket, right? Some of the very best players in the world are playing in EuroBasket. So with that in mind, Troy, I do have to ask, is the hype real with Keyshawn George here and how he's been playing?
Well, everything is relative. So, I think that we're looking at the AmeriCup like we have to view it for what it is, which is the mid-major of FIBA basketball tournaments over the course of the summer. And to me, I'm really looking at the way that Keyshawn played, and I'm happy with, some of the things with his growth and development. But the biggest thing is, how is that going to translate to his role with the Wizards? And I'm not really sure as to how much we can actually glean from that. But, it's good. Like, I'd rather have him go out there and play well than to have him go out there and not play well.
Right.
So, as far as, options go, like, I'll take option one all day, every day.
Oh, for sure. I think one thing to take away from that, too, is at times, obviously, I mentioned he was the leading scorer for Team Canada, but he really kind of was the go-to guy for them in closing stretches of the games. And in instances like against Team USA, he came up a little bit short, but it's interesting to see him in that dynamic, to fulfill that role for a team. So, Isaac, knowing that there is a question about competition level in mind, and is there still something that we can take away from Keyshawn playing in the role that he did? Do we think that it could translate? If so, what are the things that he was able to do that makes you think that way?
I think it can. I know with Troy looking like, can it translate to what the Wizards are scheming? I think it can in certain situations. If, you need him to get a bucket and you want him to have – if you need him to get a bucket for your team, you want him to have that confidence, say, hey, we're giving you the green light to do it. This was an excellent way to see if he can even do that, if you want to even possibly attempt to give him that green light. And for a player like that, you want him to already have that confidence to say, okay, maybe that's not your role right now, but when the time comes, are you going to be ready? And it definitely showed that Keyshawn can be ready for that some type of a role for the Wizards. Is that going to be his role moving forward? Absolutely not. But I can bet you that the Wizards brass probably looked at it like, okay, we see some things a little different than maybe we can possibly put him in certain situations.
All right. Well, I have a note here that probably affirms two fronts. Not only that he played well, but also does kind of affirm that the level of competition wasn't really that crazy. He was named to the AmeriCup All-Star 5. So that is very impressive. You do, as Troy said, you wanted to play well versus not playing well. But let's just name the other players who were on the All-Star starting 5 there. Javonte Smith of the U.S., Juan Fernandez of Argentina, Iago Santos of Brazil, and then Bruno Caboclo of Brazil. So, just so that way everyone is aware of who the other best players of this tournament was. So we do have to keep it our reality a little bit in check here. But even still, let's talk about the tournament as a whole. Troy, what were some of your takeaways from the entire tournament?
Well, I was just random. You mentioned the name Bruno Caboclo, and I think of our guy, a friend of the podcast, Fran Fraschilla. His famous catchphrase, 2 years away from 2 years away. But that was like 8 years ago. So,
but it happened.
It happened.
Prophecy fulfilled.
Prophecy. Yeah. So Bruno Caboclo, he finally turned into a player 8 years later, and did it in a tournament that really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But shout out to him. I think that the biggest takeaway is the fact that, Keyshawn George did exactly what he should have done when he played in a tournament where he's the only guy who's going to be playing NBA rotational minutes next season.
All right, and Isaac?
I'm tired. I've had friends that played in the AmeriCup, and although it's great for TV, it's not a serious tournament. For in the Americas as a whole, because there was not that many NBA guys that were playing. I think the other notable NBA guy that was playing was in Puerto Rico. Jose Alvarado was playing. But I'm so annoyed with not bringing at least not even your most promising young guys. If the tournament is not that serious, I still think this any type of international competition is great for young pros or great high-level young players, and especially for Team USA. So I'm just a little disappointed with the plethora of players that you can get. I'm just disappointed with the roster turnout, and it showed what this roster turnout, the best they could do is possibly a bronze.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
let's keep the talent in mind of who wants to participate, and let's move on over to the sister tournament in EuroBasket across the Atlantic. The Wizards had 3 players playing in this tournament. Let's first start with Team France. Bilal Coulibaly and Alex Sarr are playing for Team France. Let me first ask Isaac, what have you thought of Bilal Coulibaly so far?
Started out hot, but it started fizzling out. I wanted Bilal to more, take that more of that ownership role like Keyshawn and really, really expand his game, really kind of show out saying, hey, I can step into this role. But he kind of fell back a little bit. Obviously, there was little injuries and matchups that were going along in there that kind of affected that. But I was initially I was super excited, but toward the end, I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I was definitely a little bit disappointed with the fact that I wanted to see Bilal, really hone in on his playmaking skills, and I think that the more basketball that I get to see from Bilal, I think that it's gonna be really easy to kind of peg him into what type of player he's going to be. Like I think that he's going to be a 3-and-D type of player who, really is going to have to work on his offensive game in order to be an effective player in the NBA. And so, I just really haven't seen the growth and development from him that I would like to see for a player heading into year 3. And this is like the big year where teams are counting on these players going into their 3rd year to make a leap in their talent level.
Oh, for sure. And I don't think you're alone in that. I think everyone was yearning for him to display some form of step forward through this tournament, especially because the level of play is so much higher. And so you're seeing some of the very best that the NBA has to offer and some of the very best that the EuroLeague has to offer. And so he's playing against real competition, and he is really failing to show his ability to grow as a playmaker, and he's struggling. And I think that's probably a little worrisome. The reason why that year 3 is a big one for everyone is, this is really when that contract starts to get into conversation. And that's, if you're a team like the Wizards and you have as much money as they have being freed up next offseason, they're really going to be looking to save as much as possible and really only spend in the ways that really contribute to winning. And so this is definitely something that, the team as the franchise as a whole is going to be really focusing in on.
Yeah, I mean, Bilal Coulibaly is really on his Jonathan Kuminga track right now, as far as like just really just putting his like future earning power like in major jeopardy, because it's like really hard to identify who he is as a basketball player. And so, yeah, you said like the reason why the 3rd year is so important is because that 4th year comes up, and so that's when you got to start making decisions on contracts. So, yeah, I think Bilal really needs to kind of he needs to come into this season and really lock in as a potential all NBA type of defender. Or really, kind of work on that jump shot so that he can get his 3-point percentage up to, almost league average. Like, if he can do at least one of those 2 things, then I think that would be a major step forward for him in his game. And if he's not able to do one of those 2 things, then, I would feel sorry for his agent right now.
Yep, me too. But obviously, with Coulibaly, that's been a story that Wizards fans have been wanting to watch. Another one, though, there's probably a bigger story for the Wizards, and that's Alex Sarr. He hasn't played since the 2nd game of the group stages, as he's been dealing with a calf injury, which has now actually ruled him out for the remainder of EuroBasket. Troy, how worried should fans be with this injury that he's dealing with?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it like a 6 as far as being worried, only because it's of the specific injury, because it's a calf injury. And what we've seen over the last season in the NBA with all of these star players like tearing their ACLs, and we saw Tyrese Halliburton go out there and play on an injured calf and then tear his ACL. I think that this is an injury that it definitely can lead to overcompensation to other parts of your lower extremities. And so the fact that, they shut him down, I think is a great, not a great sign, because, obviously if it was a good sign, he'd be out there playing. But I think that it's great that they're like not playing around with this. They're like, let's shut him down and, see if they can't get him back on the court before Wizards training camp starts.
Yeah, we certainly hope so. And Wizards officials they have noted that they do expect him to be ready to play by the start of the upcoming season, but it is absolutely something to keep track of and be very wary of, because,
do not rush him back at all.
No, they lost a lot of really great talent, which we'll be talking about later in the show, and how that's affected the upcoming season. But Isaac, let's talk about the 2 games that he did play in. Before he went down with injury, what did you see on the floor from Sar?
A little more confidence. I'm kind of happy that, kind of expanded. I think he took whatever, last time he played publicly, I'm not sure about the outside runs that he was doing. I think he took that to heart and kind of improved a little bit in this play. I mean, obviously there was a little coming down, trying to fight with minutes with Yabusele, because Yabusele's been playing excellent for France for a little bit. But I'm happy with Sar with what we did get to see. They're showing a little bit of improvement. Obviously, there's a lot more room to go, but it showed that, hey, the jury's not out on just him just yet.
All right, cool. Well, let's see how he progresses when he comes back. But as I mentioned, it's not just 2 Wizards in this tournament. There's also a third, and he's suiting up for Team Serbia. That's right, Tristan Vukcevic has been a power forward for their team. Isaac, what have you thought of Vukcevic?
I mean, he's playing all right. I just think I'm a little more disappointed, too, because in the preliminary he was showing out a little bit. But then again, what are you going to do when you're playing alongside one of the best players in the world? Like, you just got to just get where you can get where you can fit in. And he's doing the best he can to fit in. I feel like his role for Serbia is not what exactly we would look for him in DC. It's more of like, hey, you're here to help rebound for Jokic, and so he doesn't get tired. And if you need to score, but we're good. like we're good here.
One of is an interesting choice of words.
He said hit a rebound like he did the pregame development coach.
Yeah, you're literally out there just like, all right, we got you here. Just
damn, tell him go get the Gatorade.
Literally, you act like Randy Moss with Julian Edelman. Go get my Gatorade, make my tub 140. Don't forget about it.
Hey man, don't do that. He's been playing a lot of minutes too, so let's cool off my guy a little bit. But no, I think that's what's interesting. My only takeaway really for Team Serbia is they're like almost everyone is playing the exact same volume of minutes. Like Jokic is arguably the best player, if not one of the best players in the world, and he's kind of being limited to 18 minutes a game, which isn't super out of the ordinary for these international tournaments. They do tend to even it out, but almost literally everyone on the Serbian roster is at 15 minutes a game. It's pretty interesting to see that. But let me also ask, we're talking a little bit about Serbia here. Let's also ask and open up the floor to just general takeaways of the EuroBasket tournament as well. Troy?
Yeah, I actually got a chance to watch that Serbia-Turkey game, which was a great game featuring baby Joker versus real Joker. And, Alperen Sengun, he looked like a guy who is ready to – he already took that, that third-year leap last year and made himself an all-star. I really think that, I've been impressed with how he's played and, really being the guy. And that's something that I want to see translate to his NBA career. And also shout out to his teammate over there playing for Turkey, got the naturalized citizen, Shane Larkin. He's one of those guys where I think that, NBA teams have been, inquiring about him over the last couple of years. And he's a guy who said, you know what, I think I'm good over here, getting my my Euros and competing at a high level. Like, I think that he's really carved out a name for himself on the international basketball scene, so much so that he's actually turning down NBA offers because of how much of a star he is abroad.
Yeah, that was my exact same takeaway. I had no idea that Shane Larkin was suiting up for Team Turkey. And so, I tried to do a deep dive on this. Is he of Turkish descent?
Not at all.
Not at all. So,
Not
that's really interesting there. He became a citizen in 2020. Then he had his citizenship revoked in 2022 or 2023 because he didn't play for the national team for one game. So they revoked the citizenship, and then they gave it back to him in November of last year. So very confusing how that's gone for him. But he's averaging a little under 11 points a game and 5 assists per game. So he's balling out. So credit to Shane Larkin.
Yeah, I know.
Honestly.
I know they could take your passport.
Yeah,
you got to have a bad
away.
game. They yo, that's some diplomacy tomfoolery.
I know. It's an interesting sort of track with the history of Shane Larkin and Turkey. But Isaac, what are your takeaways from the tournament?
Other than Shane Larkin balling out and doing his thing, shout out to him. He was a great college player in the U.S. and was a Hall of Fame of Barry Larkin. Got to mention that. But Portugal really impressed me. They're not a basketball country, but Neemias Queta has been hooping. He's been trying to put a little something on for Portugal. I just wish he had more of a supporting cast, but hey, that's been impressive seeing some of the European countries that don't maybe have that now are having some NBA development or guys that are representing them. It's fun to see, but Portugal is one of the teams that's been surprising me a lot because they're not known as a basketball nation, and they're out here competing and putting up some numbers against some of these basketball-heavy traditional teams. So I'm excited. It's been a very exciting tournament.
Yeah, one that is more of a basketball nation though, and I'll shout out my own heritage here, is Team Italy. They are so old. They've got some old guys on that squad, and they're kind of being led by Danilo Gallinari. So shout out to him. He just won the the Puerto Rican championship, so he's carrying that momentum over. Anyways, let us know at home what you all think of the EuroBasket and AmeriCup, and also let us know if you think the Keyshawn George hype is real, and who are some other players you didn't expect to see in either of these tournaments that you're now seeing play. Let us know in the comment section below or on X or Instagram or by texting to the show at 833-377-6630 or even clicking message the show in the episode description of this podcast. All right, we're going to take a break again. And when you get back, you're going to hear us talk about the question or grading the off seasons of the Atlantic Division. This is the Capital Hoop Caucus on ESPN 630 and the ESPN 630 app. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back into the Capital Hoop Caucus on ESPN 630. Alongside Troy Halliburton and Isaac and Wardell, I am Wardell McCabe. Thank you so much for joining us as we peruse through this episode. But we noted at the top of the show that we're continuing our grading of the off seasons around the league, and we're going to be doing so today by focusing on the Central Division, but we're doing so through the scouting report, which is we're doing so through the full court press, which is when we start to open up our eyes to the rest of the league. And, well, as much as we want to get to grading the Central Division, there is kind of a pressing story that broke around the rest of the league, one that we feel like we have to talk about at least a little bit here. Isaac, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of that major news that broke.
All-star, elite, Hall of Fame journalist at this point, Pablo Torre opened up his new podcast with The Athletic with a bombshell investigation that the Los Angeles Clippers have been circumventing the salary cap by paying Kawhi Leonard $28 million through a shell company that has just filed for bankruptcy based off of almost thousands of pages of court documents that show that this is possibly going down, and it may, in my opinion, I think this might start a whole nother investigation through other teams that are possibly doing this. But that is the big story here. Kawhi Leonard is getting extra cash under the table for a no-show, for a no-show job.
I mean, I think that the biggest takeaway here is, Kawhi Leonard saw Andre Iguodala's jersey in the bubble, group economics, and he just took that to a whole nother level. It's like, everybody's supposed to be able to eat. On a serious note, I think that this situation, shout out to Pablo Torre for his investigative journalism. But I honestly think that this story is going to be a big nothing burger at the end of the day. Like, I think that, there's a lot of smoke in the air, but there's actual no smoking gun to be like, okay, this is the thing that is going to make Adam Silver have to, take away draft picks from the Clippers or fine them. I think at the most they might, they might could get a fine. But, man, shout out to Kawhi Leonard, though, for getting that Soprano money. Like, you got to get that no-show job, where you can just get paid for, not having to do anything. Shout out to my man Chrissy from The Sopranos. It's hard. It's hard being able to pick out what I'm not going to wear to work today, what I'm not going to pack in my lunchbox. And, I think that Kawhi, shout out to him for just going out there and being Hall of Fame bag getter. Like, he knows how to get to the money, whether that be over the table, under the table. I don't know what people expect. He actually no-shows to his actual NBA job. So, it's just brutal for him from a PR standpoint. But again, like I said, like, I don't think that there's going to be enough evidence there for the NBA to actually do something tangible about this situation.
Right, and we're seeing there wasn't any punishment immediately delved in. All we do know is that the NBA is now running its own investigation, and we will see what that turns up and whether there is a smoking gun anywhere to be found. And Isaac, as you said, this is something that, people are having heavy reactions to, but it's probably something that isn't like all too foreign a concept around the league, and so we will see if there is something that comes from this, and obviously there'll probably be further investigations. But with that in mind, this has actually happened. Something similar to this has actually happened in the past. Isn't that right, Troy?
Yeah, so the biggest comparison is to the Joe Smith situation. Shout out to Joe Smith, University of Maryland legend, a former number 1 overall pick. I believe that he and his agent actually had an under the table handshake deal with a former Minnesota Timberwolves owner, Glenn Taylor. And so, but the thing that actually got them caught up is the fact that he had fallen out with the agent. And so the agent actually came forward and said, I did this thing. We had a handshake under the table, and this is how it played out. And so now that's the very tangible smoking gun that allowed the NBA to be like, okay, now we have like this tangible proof, and we're going to be able to, levy out punishments accordingly. And so with this situation, I honestly think that like it's going to be virtually impossible for them to find somebody who, like the people from Aspiration, the corporation, they're facing all type of bankruptcy charges and stuff. Like I'm sure that there aren't going to be the CEOs from that company aren't going to be willing to be like, oh yeah, we did this illegal thing to get them furthermore in trouble. Kawhi's Uncle Dennis isn't going to be like, oh yeah, we did this illegal thing that's going to get us furthermore in trouble. And then Steve Ballmer has so much plausible deniability that he could just be like, I honestly didn't know. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, I think that the way that this is going to play out, I think that, this story, it was a very real story from Pablo, and I think that it was very much sensationalized over, the last few days. But ultimately, I don't think that, that this is going to go the way that the public court of opinion thinks it's going to go.
Correct. And credit is all due to Pablo Torre and his team of journalists that they have. As they've mentioned on the episode, they have 7 sources who are former employees of this holding company. And the holding company, by the way, is called Aspiration. We should probably mention that. But yeah. They have a lot of sources within the former organization, but from what they were able to reveal, it's people who used to work in the financial department and lower tier employees, essentially. So exactly. not the main people who are going to be under serious federal investigation here. And so it's people who do not have that smoking gun. And I think that it is probably fair for people to want to see punishment here. Obviously, skirting around league rules is never great. And I imagine that some owners are probably hoping that they can bring the hammer down, especially considering the volume of funds that Ballmer brings as an owner. He is definitely the heaviest hitter of any other owner in the league. But with that in mind, obviously, there is a bit of a tie here to the Washington Wizards. Isn't that right, Troy?
Yeah, well, when you start to look at, the contract in question here is the 2021 contract extension to Kawhi Leonard. I think they offered him 3 years, $150 million. And at the time, the GM for the Los Angeles Clippers was Michael Winger. And so, I think that, with the absolute worst case scenario is that, if they are that they have this law firm that is investigating, if they are to be able to find evidence that said, Ballmer, organized, these under the table payments for Kawhi Leonard, then, I think that there could be some, type of repercussions for Michael Winger, with him having his hands, over that situation. But again, like I said, I think that's the absolute worst case scenario and probably very unlikely scenario, given the complete, I think, lack of physical evidence at this point. And so, Michael Winger, I think, has, very much insulated himself away from this situation. And, he's probably very glad that, he's on a whole nother coast right now.
Yep, for sure. But let's provide a bit of an update to things. So yesterday morning, Friday morning, Pablo Torre finds out, released a follow-up episode during which they spoke with Mark Cuban on this very subject. And Cuban made it very clear that, one, he didn't believe that Ballmer would have intentionally acted this way and then also gotten caught the way that he did. He does feel that if there is a smoking gun here, or he doesn't believe that there is a smoking gun here because he feels that Ballmer would have contributed more funds to this organization to prevent it from going bankrupt, to then prevent there being these public access files, which Pablo Torre find out was able to pick up this information on. And so he feels that there was no malicious intent by these things, that he thinks that there is genuinely an incidental happenstance here. But he did also note that he is kind of, as a competing owner here, hoping that there is a smoking gun because then the hammer can be brought down. And as someone who does, Cuban sold the majority stake of the Mavericks, but he still has a minority stake. He is hoping for the Mavericks stake that there is something there. And he even went as far as to say that if there is any GM or assistant GM who knew of this at the time, then their careers would be, quote, screwed. So that's just Mark Cuban's contribution to here. But it should also be noted that Cuban's comments were made before John Corrales of the Boston Sports Journal reported that Kawhi Leonard actually received an additional $20 million endorsement deal from Aspiration, which now brings the total up to $48 million total. And Steve Ballmer's total investment in Aspiration was $50 million. So there was a big question for everyone as to why it was only $28 million that Kawhi had received. That feels like an arbitrary number. What's actually $48 million, and it's a lot closer to that original $50 million investment from Ballmer. But we'll see whether or not the NBA's league investigation is able to pick anything up. But with that in mind, let's get back to the league as a whole. Let's go back to grading the off seasons around the league. We're going to go team by team to review their additions and departures with our host providing their own grades. And just like last time, we'll have some listener questions from the text-in line. And if you want to submit your questions for our next episode, you could just leave them in the comment section below on YouTube or text into the show at 833-377-6630, or also by clicking message the show in the episode description of this podcast, or even by messaging us on social media. Where, Isaac?
On at Cap Hoop Caucus on X, and then on Capital Hoop Caucus on Instagram.
That's right. You now have several ways for you to message the show, so you have no excuses for not writing into us. But next week, we're going to be grading the Atlantic Division, so send us any questions you have on the Celtics, Knicks, Raptors, Nets, or 76ers, and you have the opportunity to have it read and answered on ESPN 630 Radio. But let's focus now on the Central Division. Let's start out first with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They finished last season 64-18. That was good for first in the East in the regular season, but they lost in the second round to the Pacers. And some of the moves this offseason, they traded away Isaac Okoro for Lonzo Ball, and then they reunited with Larry Nance Jr. in free agency. Troy, what grade do you give the Cavs?
I'm going to give the Cavs a B. I think that when you look at what they had built up last season, and with them winning 60-plus games and then getting bounced out in the first round, and then when you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference with all the star players that are being injured, I think that their best move was to running back. And so, I think that they did enough tweaking with the roster on the margins, with that Okoro trade, bringing in Lonzo Ball, and it really, I think they upgraded that position significantly from Lonzo Ball, from Ty Jerome from last year. And so, continuity is a big thing when you're trying to win a championship. And so I think that, they really need to focus on, making it work with the guys they have. So, I like the margins. I like the moves they made on the margin.
All right.
I have to agree with Troy there. It's a B. I think making the moves on the margins with the way the CBAs operated, the Cavs did the best they could, and adding Lonzo Ball, if Lonzo is healthy, completely healthy, and he's back to where he's not even he's 40% to where he was usually playing at, you have a great two-way guard that can shoot, that can play defense, and is a better defender than Ty Jerome when completely healthy. And you can use him in so many different more situations. And bringing back Larry Nance Jr. is just a plus. I mean, he's an Ohio kid, and he loves the Cavs, and I think it didn't make sense for him not to be there. Mm-hmm. So I think the Cavs did the right thing, but the big concern is continuity. Is that going to play into the effect of Kenny Atkinson's schemes and everything?
Yeah, we'll see there. But double Bs for the Cavs. Let's move on to the Indiana Pacers. They finished last season 50-32. That was good for fourth in the East in the regular season. And obviously they went on to lose the NBA Finals to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's talk about their offseason. They brought in Jay Huff in a trade with Memphis. They then re-signed Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman. But obviously the biggest news is the departures. They lost Miles Turner, and before the offseason even began, they've already lost Halliburton for the full season with an Achilles injury. So, Isaac, what grade do you give the Pacers?
C+, and the only reason why they get the plus is because they got Jay Huff. And Jay Huff is an underrated sneaky signing. If they had him along with how stacked this roster was last year, or how they figured out the chemistry with Kyle, I'm like, this is an A. This is an A because you have Jay Huff there. But Jay Huff is there ultimately to replace one of the biggest departures that's non-injury related is Miles Turner. I'm not happy about that. Like Troy mentioned, and we just talked about, continuity is a huge thing, especially when you go to the finals. And this is the first finals run that Indiana's made in a very, very long time. And to be honest, a lot of people agree they were literally a non-contact injury away from being NBA champions. And without Tyrese being hurt,
bold statement. Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean that Game 7 was going to be legendary. So when we look at that, I feel like they should have tried to bring back Miles, run it back without Tyrese, get a guard to, hold it down the fort, get TJ McConnell, little star power, and go above and beyond the luxury tax, and in 2027, try to win a title. There's no reason for that. So for that, I'm giving them a C+, but only for the plus because of Jay Huff. Jay Huff's a great signing.
And Troy?
I'm gonna give them a B+. The reason why I'm grading them so high is because they made probably one of the most forward-thinking moves of the offseason when they actually traded their first-round draft pick in this year's draft to get back their first-round draft pick in next year's draft. So now that they actually have the ability to actually tank properly, they don't have to worry about going out and overachieving. They can lose as many games as they want, and they actually keep their pick. And so I thought that was a very underrated deal that really changed everything for them for the offseason. And then I'm a big Jay Huff fan. I think that his time that he spent with the Wizards and the Capital City Go-Go, it really showed me that he truly is a talented big man in this league. And when you can stretch the floor and protect the rim, I think that he just needs more opportunity. And so, I think that, the Miles Turner loss is definitely going to be significant for them as far as the experience is concerned. But I think that people will be very surprised to the level of production that they get from Jay Huff and Isaiah Jackson.
All right, so we got ourselves a C+ and a B+, but we also have a listener question. So, Troy, let me ask you this. With Halliburton out next year and Turner gone, can anyone draw attention away from Pascal?
Yeah, I think Andrew Nembhard is a guy who I would be looking out for the Most Improved Player award. I think that he's a guy who definitely will have opportunities to showcase, his playmaking abilities, and he's just going to be just a lot more prominent. As far as the Indiana Pacers basketball team is going to be concerned, I think that he's going to have a chance to be on an all defensive team. He's going to have a chance to really go out there and showcase what he can do with Tyrese Halliburton being out.
Okay, let's move on to Milwaukee now. The Bucks, They finished 48-34 last season. That was good for 5th in the East, and they lost in the first round of the playoffs to, well, the aforementioned Indiana Pacers. Their offseason, they've re-signed Kevin Porter Jr., Bobby Portis, and Gary Trent Jr., as well as, well, a real MVP, Thanasis Antetokounmpo. They also signed Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, and Miles Turner in free agency, and they traded away Pat Connaughton and Damian Lillard. They also lost Brooke Lopez in free agency. Troy, what grade do you give the Bucks for their offseason?
I'm going to give the Bucks a C. I think that, I'm going to give them a C really based on the fact that they paid Damian Lillard like $100 million to just go away. Like, to me, as far as team building standpoint, I thought that was a very questionable decision for them to do. For them to spend all that money for Damian Lillard to go away and then bring in Miles Turner, all for them to really be, kind of in play-in contention, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I'm going to give them a C. But I do like some of their those on-the-margin moves they made. I like Cole Anthony being there. I think that he's a player who has an opportunity to kind of, grow as a playmaker, playing next to Giannis. And, some of those other names is just kind
of. I'm going more C- because there's no sense of direction with this team. The only sense of direction that we're getting of an inkling is you re-sign Thanasis Antetokounmpo, which means Giannis is staying for at least the foreseeable future. But, it just seems so confusing. You spend all that money on Damian Lillard. You're losing young pieces like underrated with that signing of Thanasis. You're losing Andre Jackson, Connecticut player, not high level defender, but potentially someone who's budding into a good defender or young talent who you could have off the bench. Because one of the biggest complaints that the Bucks had is that they were getting a little older. I'm not sure. There's no direction of the roster right now, despite some of the good pieces that they have. There's just no sense of direction.
All right. Well, let's talk about their direction a little bit. We have another listener question here. Isaac, do the Bucks think they reopened their title window?
No. I even with the wide open East, in my opinion, no. I hate to say this. I respect Doc Rivers entirely, but he hasn't shown anything above and beyond that says that, yeah, they can be. And maybe the luck of the draw happens, but no, in my opinion, no.
Okay, well, let's move on to Detroit. They finished 44-38 last season. That was good for 6th in the East, and they lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Knicks. They brought in Duncan Robinson via sign and trade, and then they also signed Karis LeVert, but they lost Tim Hardaway Jr. and Dennis Schroeder in free agency. Isaac, what grade do you give the Pistons?
I'm giving the Pistons a B because I think they got the pieces that they needed. I feel bad about the Duncan Robinson signing because that's only because a favorite player of the show was going through some investigations, and now
really?
Favorite Malik Beasley. So they did the best they could and stayed with the margins. I'm gonna give them a B because I think it's a continuity thing with the Pistons. They have a good young core. They look good, and now they added pieces that make sense to add to that continuity. So if they keep playing as hard as they are, with Cade Cunningham finally evolving into the player that we've all thought that he's gonna be, heck yeah. So I'll give him a B. But I mean, if they can find a way to bring back MB, he paid his rent too in Detroit. Detroit's got a little something on the handle with.
All right, Troy.
did he pay his barber? Did he pay his dentist?
He paid his rent.
Shout out to Malik Beasley. I'm gonna give them a C because I do think that the Malik Beasley I think there's a downgrade from Malik Beasley to Duncan Robinson. Like, Malik Beasley essentially put up a top 3 Klay Thompson type season last year, and you just can't replicate that. Like, as far as the amount of threes and the percentage that he was hitting at. I think that with Detroit, I think for them, they're going to have to if they're going to improve, it's going to have to be internally within their own players. So you're going to have to see guys like Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren make leaps in their games. Because this is one of the things that happens when you're a young team and you have these players who are starting to get on their second contracts. So they're going to have a lot of decisions to make as far as who they're going to be paying. And so, I think that they had a relatively average offseason for a team who is just starting their, kind of playoff window.
All right, well, let's talk about some of those decisions because we have another listener question here. And this one, just to be clear, I did not spell check, probably should have. But Troy, the question for you is, did Detroit bring Beasley back?
I don't think so. I think that for NBA teams, like once they make decisions, once they pivot, like it's very rare that you pivot back.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that once it's very unfortunate for Malik Beasley, in his representation that, that report came out at the most inopportune time, literally right before he was getting ready to sign a reported contract extension. And so, I believe that once the Detroit Pistons pulled that offer off the table, I just don't see them pivoting back, like, and going, even if they were to offer him something else lower. I just think that in their minds, they've just moved forward. And so, that Duncan Robinson's there. And so, I think that they're just trying to figure out how they can build around the team that they have right now.
Oh, yeah. And I think you just mentioned something that's an unfortunate byproduct. I mean, we joked about his situation, but yeah, he lost out a lot of money on that contract extension. Like, and that's something that's probably not likely to come back around. So very unfortunate for him there. But let's close this out. Let's move on to the Chicago Bulls. They finished last season 39-43. That was good for 9th in the East, but they actually lost to the Heat in the first game of the play-in tournament. So, they didn't really have a great advancement there. They re-signed Trey Jones, and then, as I mentioned earlier, they brought in Isaac Okoro as part of that aforementioned Lonzo Ball trade that sent Ball to Cleveland. So, actually, I'm just noticing a weird thing here. My research might be off, but none of these teams actually had a first-round pick this year. So that's kind of odd. Anyways, Troy, what grade do you give the Bulls for their offseason?
I'm going to give them a D. I think that they probably had one of the worst off seasons in the NBA. They didn't really do much of anything. Like, they added Isaac Okoro, so they now they have like this just plethora of non-shooting wings on their team. So like I just cannot make sense as to what the Chicago Bulls are doing. And so, it's very rare to have a team who actually has a future outlook that's worse than the Wizards.
Yeah, I'm giving them even lower than D because a D minus. Can I give them a D minus? Yeah,
D minus is a great
pick. D minus, yeah. Just they have no idea what they're doing. They have absolutely no idea what they're doing, and they've drafted. Okay, you got Josh Giddey, who's a young guy who seems young and promising, but you're not building around that. You're not saying like, hey, this is what our identity is. You're trading for players that do make sense in the short term. But, like, long-term, like, where are they going? And, like you mentioned, they have not drafted in the first round in this past draft, which was a historic draft. And I wouldn't be assuming that they wouldn't be drafting anybody in the first round next year either, unless something barring happens in the lottery or trades, anything that happens. So I feel bad for Bulls fans for what was such a storied franchise that's had some highs and a lot more lows in the last 10 to 15 years, so like D minus.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to note there, they right now, as of this recording, they technically don't have Giddey. He's not signed a qualifying offer.
Oh gosh,
so, like,
that's wild
he's
too.
Still a restricted free agent. So
it's like, what are we doing here?
He's just kind of there. Anyways, Isaac, last listener question for this before we wrap it up. Is this the final year that we get to avoid, or is this the year we finally get to avoid seeing Chicago in the play-in tournament?
I hate to say it, no.
You think they're still going to make the play?
Somehow, like it's some dark, weird magic, and the only reason I say that they have Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan tries to actually coach. Like, he's not out here like, oh, I'm a pros coach. No, he's a coach by trade. He's a teacher by trade. And when you're a teacher like that and you have like a set mind, he's like, oh no, we're going to try to win here. We're going to try to win with what we got.
Such a great teacher that he left Oklahoma City because he thought that was going to take too long to rebuild, so he went to Chicago because they had a better chance at winning a title. That's that same Billy Donovan?
Same Billy Donovan. But like I said, they've been going to the plan. That's why I'm like, it's Billy Donovan. That's why.
So. Well, that's our grades, or at least that's our host's grades. Let us know what you think. Did you agree? Did you disagree? We want to hear it. We also want to hear any questions that you may have next week for us on the Atlantic Division. That's right. Send us any questions you may have for the Celtics, Knicks, Raptors, Nets, or 76ers, and our host can read them on the show. Just leave a comment below or text in at 833-377-6630. Click message the show in the podcast description of this episode or on social media. Where, Isaac?
At Cap Hoop Caucus on Twitter and then Capital Hoop Caucus on Instagram.
That's absolutely right. And we're going to take one final break here on the other side. We'll have trivia time for the line. This is the Capital Hoop Caucus on ESPN 630 and the ESPN 630 app. Welcome back into the Capital Hoop Caucus. I'm Wardell McCabe. I'm joined right now, as always, by Troy Halliburton and Isaac Harris. On today's show, we've recapped the last 2 weeks of Mystics basketball and then did the same to the FIBA AmeriCup and EuroBasket. We also gave our off-season grades to the Central Division. And if you missed any part of the fun, do not worry, do not stress, because you can always catch the podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. And while you're there, be sure to give us a rate and review. But you can also catch us and look at us on YouTube. So there's multiple ways for you to watch us if you missed the show or if you missed any part of the show. That means you have no excuses. Point blank, period. None. All right. Now let's get back to this show. Before closing it out, because it's almost time to wrap it up, we know that, as always, it's time for me to make my way for our next host, because we have something we have here called Trivia Time for Line. So let me make way for Guy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Trivia Time from the Line. I'm your host, Guy, and you all know the name of the game. Now let's get to the aim of the game, which is this: to score more points than your opponent. We'll have 5 minutes on the clock, during which our contestants will have to correctly guess as many players' names as possible in a surprise category of our choosing. Joining us today are Troy and Isaac. Isaac, do you have any idea of what today's category is going to be? Well, here's what it's going to be, because news broke earlier this week that EA is no longer developing a college basketball game. So, to commemorate this true demise, you'll be naming the cover athletes of each player who was on the cover of EA's NCAA March Madness games. When you make your guess, please provide the year they were on the cover, their position, their alma mater, and jersey number, along with their names. Are you ready to begin?
Yep.
Then flip over those papers and let's start. We'll start first with Troy.
All right, let's go. 2004, small forward, Syracuse, 3 to the dome. My man, Carmelo Anthony.
Mello is correct. Isaac.
2010 power forward, Oklahoma, number 23, Blake Griffin.
It is Blake Griffin. Troy.
All right, 2008, small forward, number 35. Shout out KD, Kevin Durant.
It is Kevin Durant. Isaac.
2009 power forward, UCLA, number 42, Kevin Love.
It is Kevin Love. Troy.
All right, let's go 2006, point guard, University of North Carolina. Let's go with Raymond Felton.
It is Raymond Felton. Isaac.
Ooh, okay. 2005 center, UConn, number 50, Emeka Okafor.
It is Okafor. Troy.
Okay, let's go 2002, small forward, Duke. That's Who's the Man, Battier.
It is Battier. Isaac.
1998 center, Wake Forest, number 21, Tim Duncan.
It is Tim Duncan. Troy.
All right, let's go 2000 point guard at the University of Maryland, number 23. That's Stevie Francis.
It is the franchise. Isaac.
Ooh. 2007 shooting guard, Gonzaga, number 3, Adam Morrison.
It is Morrison. Troy.
All right, let's go 1999 power forward, UNC. Let's go Anton Jameson.
It is Jameson. Isaac.
All right. Let's see here. 2003 power forward, Kansas, number 0. Nope, it's not who I think it is. I have to pass on that
Okay,
one. I have to pass on
Troy.
that.
I got this one. 2003 Power Forward Kansas. Shout out to former Wizard Drew Gooden.
It is Drew Gooden. Isaac.
2001 Power Forward Cincinnati. I want to say Jason Maxiel.
No, Troy.
This is why, hey, look, I'm going to have to close it out with the victory. This goes 2001 Power Forward Cincinnati. That is Kenyon Martin Sr.
It is Kmart.
Wow.
And just like that, for the very first time ever,
We got all the answers.
we got all the answers picked up. So that means it's time to tally these results. Don't know if there's going to be a surprise here, but we shall see. As the scores are 5 for Isaac and 8 for Troy, meaning that the win and the closeout does in fact go to Troy, putting the 3 to the dome. Troy, do you have any celebratory words for the people?
Yeah, man, shout out to Melo going to Hall of Fame.
All right. And Isaac, do you have any inspirational words for someone who finished in last?
No.
Nothing for you there. All right, everyone. That does it for us here for Trivia Time for the Line. We'll see y'all next time. Bye. All right. Who won this week?
Troy did. It happens.
It does happen.
It does.
A lot, actually.
I'm a little bummed because I overthought the Cincinnati one. I was thinking Kenyon, but I'm like, because I know someone. I know them personally. I know like 4 people personally on that Cincinnati roster, and I've met Kenyon, and I'm like, it's probably Kenyon, but I'm like, let me try another Cincinnati player.
Yeah, would have made sense to go with the guy who was picked number 1 overall on that team.
Yeah, but like I don't know. I was like I overthought it, and then I overthought the Kansas one too. I was like,
yeah, I was sitting there. I was like, I knew because of the number 0. I was like, okay, I know.
I kept for some reason in my head. I wasn't thinking Drew Gooden for Kansas. I was thinking someone completely different. I was like, no, that's why I'm like, let me pass on this one.
It's wild because I actually had that game with Drew getting on the cover too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I knew.
The last game I had was KD. So yeah, it was 08. So that was a different one. Man, I'm kind of a little bummed. Sorry, Kenyon, if you ever see this.
Chin up, buddy. You get them next time.
And
you know,
Coach
this is
Mark.
what you do. You rise up, you try again. We'll see how it goes and fares for you next week. But it's almost time to close out the show. Before doing so, though, as always, we have the last shot, which is when each of us has 24 seconds to speak on anything basketball related beyond the limits of the DMV. It could be a shout out, a hot take, personal gripe, whatever it is. Now's the time to let it fly. The only rule is that when your 24 seconds is up, the microphone will shut off. So, Troy, you ready to take your last shot?
Born ready. For my last shot, I'm going to give a shout out to Tracy McGrady, who announced today that he's going back to Adidas basketball. And with that partnership, they're bringing back the prestigious ABCD basketball camp with some of the most famous names in battles. LeBron James versus Lenny Cook. Like, to have that camp back is just something amazing, and I'm looking forward to what it's going to mean.
Damn, just in the nick of time, too. Excellent work there by Troy. Isaac, you ready to take your last shot?
Yeah. I am upset with EA not fighting for us college basketball fans after the success of their game and letting 2K take it, and 2K being completely uneducated by saying only 100 teams will be featured, even though there's over 300 teams in this game. Shame on you, 2K, and shame on you, EA. You guys should be banned to the Shadow Realm for what's going on with video games.
What?
Damn, man. All that smoke for EA. And,
I know.
And none for the O'Bannons. the real villains just walking away free.
All right. Let me go ahead and take my last shot. Troy mentioned it earlier, but it's finally here, everyone. Take a breath of fresh air and rejoice because the greatest Denver Nugget of all time, and arguably the greatest basketball player of all time, who's to say, is being memorialized in Springfield, Massachusetts. That's right, Carmelo Anthony is going into the Hall of Fame to dust off those Jays, put those headbands on, and put the 3 to the dome because it's time we all stay mellow. All right, that'll do it for us here. Troy, where can our listeners get more of your work?
You can always find me on the platform formerly known as Twitter, now X, at Troy Halliburton.
And Isaac?
You can always find me on Instagram at Isaac_Ajikum Harris at 224, and then also on Twitter at Ike Iriafen.
All right, you can probably find me at Ponix Wardell. I'm considering dusting off the social media stuff. I'm not really sure it's tentative right now. But for anyone at home, thank you so much for tuning in to the Capitol Hoop Caucus. If you missed any part of today's show, as I said earlier, you can always catch it on the podcast feed, wherever it is you get your podcasts. You don't believe me? Open up that app right now. Type in Capitol Hoop Caucus at the search bar. I promise you, we're right there. Listen to the episode. Listen to the last few episodes. Share the episode if you can. And then also, we'd really appreciate it if you gave it a rate and review. It actually really helps us in reaching other fans in this area and other basketball fans just in general. So if you could do us that kindness, we'd really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, we're also on YouTube. So if you wouldn't mind giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel, that'd be super helpful too in providing your comments. Again, these are just things that just help the show out a little bit more, and it's really appreciated by us. But if you're listening on the radio, then coming up will be directly after this, actually, is going to be pregame coverage of the Virginia Cavaliers radio network as UVA is set to take on NC State. Kickoff is scheduled for 12 noon Eastern. Then later today, we'll come back on with some late-night Orioles baseball as the O's host the Dodgers. First pitch is scheduled for 7:05 p.m. Eastern, with coverage beginning here at 6:30 p.m. on the Orioles radio networks, presented by Sprinkler Fiddlers Local 669. And both of those games are airing live on ESPN630DC.com, the ESPN 630 app, or 630 on your AM dial. Signing off for Isaac and Wardell, Troy Halliburton, and myself, Wardell McCabe. This has been another episode of the Capitol Hoop Caucus, reminding you to check out 51st.news because local journalism is vital to all forms of resistance. Please be kind to one another. We'll talk to you all at the same time next week.